Yeah, we didn't.
Yeah, we did not.
We did.
Okay, okay. Typo.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the exciting, spectacular
Wow.
2021, 2022
Wow.
budget presentation. This is our first draft run through of the budget. The Board of Education at their places has copies of what we're going to be presenting tonight. Shireen is going to try to share what she can, and if for some reason you don't get it and you're watching online, we will have it available to you after the meeting, okay? So this is, again, a first draft run through. We would expect to have the final draft that the Board of Education will be accepting for adoption by probably our March meeting, or we'll at least have the closest look at it. And here we go. So as we look at next year's budget, we're going to continue to live within the new normal. So the new normal kind of has changed. The new normal used to be life after the recession, and now the new normal is life during and hopefully after the pandemic, right? So that'll be the next thing. We're going to continue to adjust staffing to enrollment. The positive thing, I think, for Marcus Whitman is that our enrollment is starting to hold steady, which is a good sign for us. We had a little bit of a drop over the past few years. Most schools in New York State are seeing a decline in enrollment. We're seeing a slight decline, but not to the same level that some other schools are seeing, and that's good for us. We also want to work within the tax cap, and I'll kind of explain what the tax cap is that we estimated for next school year and why it's there. We also want to be able to take maybe some resources that we've been using this year or in prior years and use those resources to help us to adjust to what we need to have in the future. And then lastly, the other thing we have to do really is manage the impact of COVID-19, because even if everybody gets their second vaccine and things start to get better, there will still be aftermath of COVID-19 in terms of mental wellness, and probably will be some requirements, I would think, for remote instruction still, and probably limitations on field trips and all of that going into next year would be my guess. So in our current budget development, we want to maintain existing programs to the extent possible. And the reason why that I say the extent possible is because we don't quite know yet what state and federal money is going to be coming our way. So if we end up with a decent amount of state and federal money coming our way, we'll be able to maintain all of our existing programs. If we have any difficulty with that, we may have to curtail some of those programs, and we would take a look at those. Right now, as we're studying the situation, we don't see the need to have to remove any programs, but we are taking a very, very close look at all of our staffing, as we always do. Even in a good budget year, it goes on, make sure you're taking a close look at your staffing. Something new that you're going to see tonight as Board of Education members, a couple of things. One of those things, we're looking to provide resources for our district goals. Safety is obviously our number one goal. Safety doesn't just mean, active shooter type safety. It also means safety and cleansing and disinfecting related to COVID and staffing for COVID disinfection and all of that. But the next thing is the what's called the Science of Reading Initiative. And that's one of the pieces when I was hired, I was asked to take a very close look at how we can improve our reading scores. And one of the pieces that we found was that we don't have consistent reading instruction. And because of that, we've had difficulty keeping our reading scores up. So we've got an English language arts committee that's helping us to work on that. And we're going to be looking at a thing called the Science of Reading very, very closely. In fact, we have been looking at it and with a group called the Reading League. And we're very, very close to making some decisions on what we're going to do next. And those are going to require some resources for next year's budget. And then lastly, and I want to thank Brenda Lehman and her crew, we still have to continue to improve our technology and integration infrastructure. I totally understand that outside of here, Frontier needs to do a better job of getting internet access and all of that. but we need to continue to do things in-house that are gonna help us with bandwidth and make sure that we have all the tools and professional development that our people need to do their jobs. The big challenges, I think, for next year's budget are gonna be what I would call legacy COVID-19 costs. Like, for example, when we get to some future slides and you see central services has an increase, well, that's because we're gonna carry over 6 temporary cleaners because we don't know what we don't know, and we have to staff for that. And if we end up not needing that, then we can make a move, but right now we don't know. So that's one of the challenges that we have to face. Another one is, we hear all these things about relief packages and aid and help and all of that, but we've seen nothing. And until we see something, we're gonna keep that in the challenge category. So with state aid and federal aid. And one of the pieces that we fear, and I'm sure all of you have seen it, is if we get money from the federal government to go to the state and then to schools, the fear is that the state is not gonna pick up the tab when the federal government stops paying for that. And you're gonna hit this thing called a fiscal cliff that everybody talks about in 3 to 4 years. And what we want to do is build budgets that look forward to that. And we're going to talk about some ways that this budget will hopefully make some money for us moving forward. And then the last thing is the tax cap. All of you in one way, shape, or form have been helping with our community need, whether it's food link or other things that you've done. And so it's out there. And because of that, we don't want to be disrespectful to our community and bring a budget to them that would exceed the tax cap. People are hard pressed in paying bills and all of that. So we want to keep this budget within that tax cap, which this budget will. So on the next slide, a couple pieces that you're going to see. You can create a budget and talk about it in 2 different ways, one by type and one by category. So this is the first slide here is by type, where we have it broken down by instruction, etc. If you take a look at the debt service slide, debt service line, you're gonna see that the debt service is up about 23.82%. Nothing to be worried about. That's what we expected, because we've got to pay back some of the money that we borrowed for our capital project. The one new piece that we've got in here that I've mentioned is under interfund transfer. And that's, we would like to do what's called a capital outlay project. And what a capital outlay project is, you could give them $100,000 each year. They're within your regular budget. And what they help you to do are take care of some of those items that maybe you don't want to put in a regular building project, because parents and community members are looking for things that they can see, touch, use, take pictures of. And when you look at some of the work that we have to do, we have some boiler work, we have cooler work, we have some brick repointing work, and things that just aren't super exciting. And that's what some of these $100,000 capital outlay projects are used for. And what happens with them is, once you do one, you start to generate building aid, just like you would generate building aid from a regular capital project. And what's nice is, once you've done one once in your budget, then that number kind of stays in there, and it continues to generate aid every year, even though you pick up little pieces that you have to take care of every year. So A, it's a good maintenance plan, and B, it's a way to have the budget help generate some money. So that might be new for some of you, or maybe some of you have had it in budgets a long time ago. It's something that I had to pull out of the playbook during my Hammondsport years ago after 9/11, to try to close some budget holes and make things run a little more smoothly. On the next slide, you can take a look, and this is the one slide I like to tell people about the store, because we are an educational facility. If you look at the instruction and benefits, we're talking more than 70% of our budget is going into those things, which is a positive thing. I mentioned to you, central services might be up a little bit. You see 9.5% increase in central services. It's not because we're buying a lot of extra stuff. That's staffing cost for COVID-19 related expenses. And again, that goes back to the challenges and opportunities slide, where I said, the challenge is state and federal aid. If we get it, then this is going to be a challenge. If we don't, then it is. And that's one of the things that we'll be working through. I was reading some of the national news right up until I came down here today, while we were trying to get people their vaccine appointments, and it looks like things are progressing. So I think that the budget that we'll bring to you for adoption will be one that we'll be able to carry to the voters in the fall and do all right with. This next slide, page 7, if you have your handout, is an important one for you, I think, because it's different than what you've seen before. It's an interesting slide. What the government did is they changed how aid is categorized. And if you look in the first column where it says state aid governor's proposal, you see foundation aid, expense-driven aid, which has BOCES, textbook, and then you see below that transportation. They've called all of that services aid. And what we have to be incredibly careful of is if you see somebody who has had a chance to take a look at our state aid runs in the paper or on the internet, they're going to see that our services aid is a huge increase for next year than what we had this year. And that's a false positive, to use COVID terms. That's a false positive, because that number was generated by a computer program that took into effect what was inputted prior year when COVID wasn't happening, through what's called our ST3 document, one of our state documents. And that just makes the assumption that we're going to run our buses all the time that we normally have in all of our field trips and all of our everything, and we just haven't done that. So that number, the transportation number, was significantly overinflated. Our BOCES aid, that makes the assumption that all of our kids are going to go to the same BOCES programs, be in class every day, paying the full tuition. Well, that's not the case either because of COVID. So that number is overinflated as well. So when you take a look at especially specifically those two areas, there were major reductions to what you might see online or what somebody might talk to you about at Whitman's. And so what Zoe and I did, we were conservative budgeters, so we took a very conservative look at the services aid. And in fact, I work with a couple of other working superintendents just to try to help them. And in all of those schools where I'm trying to help them, it's the exact same thing. They're way over, and we're trying to dial it back to what might be a little more realistic. So if anything, you look over to the right of services aid and you see an increase of $81,895. By the time the budget is done, that might actually be a little bit higher than that, but we'd rather, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And this is why in February, we want to give you probably a number that's going to be a little bit lower than it might be, just in case, right? And the private and high excess cost aid, that has to do with students that we have that are incredibly high need and what they cost. And Andrea has done a really good job with her staff to clearly identify who those students are, make sure that we're billing properly, make sure that they're in the proper schools and getting the proper transportation. And so we have most of that sorted out. While that does amount to a slight decrease in our private and high excess cost aid, where we're gaining money on the other end is in the high school, for example, we'll be rolling over an 811 program that we currently started in the middle school this year over to the high school. So instead of sending those students to BOCES and having a gigantic expense to that, we're going to have those students in our high school. So we're excited about that. And Jen and Andrea are planning for that. The estimated state reimbursement of the $300,000, we were told, and you can read it in a billion documents, that number is good. So we didn't mess with that number. That 300,000 we kept and pulled it over to next year. So what that does is it gives us an increase in aid of about $457,000. And again, that's conservative. It'll probably be a little bit higher than that. We'd rather under promise and over deliver. When you look at the next page, what you're going to see is that all the numbers generally remain the same except for the state aid. Not a problem. It means we've got a decent plan in place on how to attack and balance the budget. Slide 9, I won't go into too many details, but
Chris, that state aid, without getting my calculator out, is at an increase of, did you base that on, you based that on what you just said?
Right.
That's where you got that from
Correct.
there. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha.
The tax cap formula on slide 9 I'm not gonna go into the big long thing like I normally do about the tax cap.
No,
We receive all of those numbers from a variety of places, so there's no number in the tax cap formula that we make up or calculate. It's given to us, and then we plug it in. The biggest thing that you're going to hear, if you're active in the school boards right now and are attending the meetings and are reading what they have to put out, or the Rural Schools Association, if you're involved in that, or read what they have to put out, what you're gonna see are several schools that have negative tax caps. And the reason why they have negative tax caps is because they're not currently doing construction, is really the biggest reason. If you're doing construction and you have a principal and interest payment that comes out of your general budget, the way it calculates is that gives you credit in your tax cap calculation is what happens. And if you don't have that going on, you don't get that credit, so to speak, and your tax cap becomes lower. And in some cases, it can actually become a negative, where you have to reduce your budget and your levy to be within the tax cap. And that's another reason why I always think you should have a project on the books, because you always want that credit in your tax cap. Not to be misconstrued with, we always want to have a high tax increase for our taxpayers, but you want to have something low, like something between 0 to 3%, because if you don't, you're going to pay the piper eventually, and that's when you have problems. And nobody ever remembers the years where you gave money back, or they don't remember that. They remember what, and I wouldn't either. It's just the way life works. So this next slide, I appreciate. One of the many things I appreciate about Zoe is there were a few things that I brought because I've had them forever, and then there's a few things that she had when I got here, and she's done a masterful job of kind of being able to combine the two so that I'm comfortable presenting and she's comfortable calculating. So I appreciate that. If you look at the current year that we're in, 2020-21, the allowable tax levy increase then was 5.33%. But if you remember, we had a 3.57% increase. We are projecting a tax cap of 2.32% coming up, and we will probably hit that number. So when I have a conversation with taxpayers sometimes, like at the diner, when I can go back there, we tax for what we need. We're not a district, and I'm not a superintendent that would ever suggest to tax for what we don't need. So what that means is, if you look at the bottom right of that slide 10, this district, we've been $283,760 below what we could have taxed people since 2016-17. And I think it's important because that's a trust builder, I think, for a community, just to have them know and understand that we only tax what we need. So the next slide, slide 11, I think is kind of interesting too. It's a tax levy versus the tax rate. So if you remember, the levy is the percent of tax total that we have to collect over the 100 and so many square miles that we have. Each individual homeowner is going to pay a piece of that, okay? And so if you look at the middle of that slide where it says tax rate increase or decrease, you're going to see that while our tax levy has gone up the past few years by a couple of percent here and there, the tax rate that people have paid has actually gone down. And the tax rate is the number that people like, because that's the number that gets multiplied times the assessed value of their house, right? So when you look at it that way, so the bottom slide there, which is what I call the working at grandma and grandpa, or for me, working at Mabel Deal's table and helping her to kind of understand what her tax impact might be. You look at the very bottom two rows, and we can see taxes on $100,000 assessed home. You can decide with whoever you're working with if they get the enhanced star exemption or if they get the basic star exemption. That gets subtracted from what their home's value is times an estimated tax rate. And so we can see that for the current year that we're in, was about a $22 increase. It was a $15 decrease the year before, so a $5 net. And we'll see what happens once we get the tax rates for next school year. It's going to be right in that zone. It's going to be somewhere between 0 and a couple of bucks more or a couple of bucks minus, is what it'll be when it's all said and done.
There's an error on this.
I just saw the error on this. It's $22. It should be a negative
Or
$22.
negative 20, yeah. So I am, my fault.
Those were
No,
on
it's not
that.
your bad.
So negative, we went through all the numbers.
Yeah, I know.
So negative $22, right? So slide 12 is in our current budget development. We have not changed how much money we're using out of reserves or how much we're using out of fund balance to balance the budget. That's a very important thing to tell people, because people who know enough about budgets to be dangerous are going to say that, well, once you use reserves or once you use fund balance, you don't get that back. And the answer is yes. But as you look at our audit report that we had this year, we underspent the budget and we underestimated revenues, which means we ended the year in a positive way. So we didn't use all of the fund balance that we said we were going to use, and we didn't use all of the reserves that we said we were going to use. And that's what we want to try to continue on that trend if we can. And you're always trying to have your budget, like I said, make a little bit of money, not a lot, make a little money for the next year. The governor's tax cap, 2.32%. I don't know if that'll change or not. It shouldn't, because the growth factor number we already know, which is a big number that helps us to calculate the tax cap, and the allowable growth levy is also out there. Very, very low. It was either 1.321 or 1.123%, which is an incredibly low number. So if you're thinking about the consumer, so stick it in your brain about consumer price index, and that's why you're getting, 2% interest on your mortgages and all that kind of stuff, right? And so it helps you in purchase. In this case, it's helping me to buy a house, and it's also helping us to get a budget that'll balance. One thing we want to do, though, is look out to 2023-24. I think the board did a phenomenal job when we're negotiating contracts and trying to make sure that we're taking care of employees, because from our administrators, every employee that we have here has been pulling extra weight during this pandemic. There's no question about it. And I think as you look at the settlements around the area, we have reflected that in what we've negotiated for our employees. And I appreciate you doing that as a Board of Education. The other piece of that is if you remember, when you look at health insurance costs, right? And you look at the current health insurance plans that are available, and then you look at a high deductible plan that's there, where the high deductible plan will save both the employee and the district. We will be realizing that halfway through next year into the following year and beyond, when we're really going to need to close some budget gaps. And that's going to be really good, because instead of me coming to you and saying, hey, we need 2.5 fewer people because of the budget, we can look to the savings that we're attaining through the high deductible plan. Okay. And so I appreciate you for being on board with that and helping to champion that. The expenditures versus revenues, school districts and federal governments are the two places. Well, federal government can run in the deficit as far as they want. School districts and our home budgets and all that cannot run in the deficit. You can until the bill collectors start coming, and then you're out in the street. We don't want to be teaching kids outside during the winter. So we wanted to project our expenses versus the money that we're going to take in. So I'm going to take you to slide 14, if I could. In balancing the budget, we have a current deficit of $680,815. I don't want you to go home and get sick over that, please. Okay, it's February 8th, or whatever the date is today, and we're giving you a worst case scenario draft of the budget. You subtract from that the tax cap for the tax levy increase of 2.32%. That leaves us with a deficit of about 326,000. That's our worst case scenario deficit moving forward from today. So if you remember last year at this table, we sat and talked about a deficit that was close to 2 million. It was close to $1 million something. It was well over $1 million. This is not that, right? This is about not even a quarter of what our deficit was. So the thing we need to be thinking about is, how do we strategize for not 21, 22. So I think we're gonna be able to get through 21, 22 very well. How do we do 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25? And that's by, I think, or we think, being conservative and just making sure that we're presenting the numbers that are very conservative and staying that way. Zoe and I will, in another couple days, we'll reach out to our staff and we'll tell them that we're going to be freezing spending except for health, welfare, safety related items. What that'll do is it'll help us to slow the spending down in the budget. We'll create a little budget underspending at the end of the year. That goes into this $325,000 gap. You know, we'll see what COVID brings if we don't need to carry all six temporary workers in the next year. That's a significant savings, and so on. So by the time we come to you in March, we'll be able to delineate those and then start planning for the year after that, the year after that, the year after that. And as we've spoken, not in public session, but in executive session, because it's involved specific people, I've mentioned to you some of those plans for doing some rearranging and stuff like that, that would fit perfectly into a 22, 23, 23, 24 budget scenario, along with the health insurance changes and all of that. So feel halfway, knock on wood, feel halfway decent. We need to continue to champion out in the community the trust that the community has in us. It's a huge responsibility to have their trust and to keep it. So we need to be transparent. So when people have questions about the budget, if you don't know an answer to give them, give me a call. I'll call them. Zoe will call them. Somebody will have them in if we can't. Whatever it takes to make sure that people have all the information that they need. We don't want to blindside anybody, specifically that capital outlay piece. So what I'll be doing is starting to plant the seeds, A, about the budget, but B, about that capital outlay plan, because it might be a little bit new to some community members. And I want them to really have an understanding of what we're trying to make the budget do to help them and their kids moving forward in the next year. So there will be a last slide. The slide 16, bus proposal, nothing crazy, what you've been used to. Again, for those who might be watching on Zoom who aren't familiar with bus purchases, we have a 5-year repayment plan now of state aid. So what we try to do is we try to balance how many buses can we buy, knowing that without having any additional impact on the tax levy. What do you do? The magic number, it looks like, is 5 coming up. And how do we make that happen? And so that we don't have any additional impact on our taxpayers and keep that moving forward. If you're watching on Zoom, the key piece of that is the average number of miles on a school bus before we trade them in or replace them, about 160,000 miles. That's a lot of miles on the roads that we drive. So, okay.
Chris,
Yes.
regarding that statement there, obviously we didn't transport as many kids this past year. Has
Right.
there been any change of thought? I know we have a 5-year thought
Yeah.
on it, but
But we will be, I mean. when
yeah,
you look
going
at-
forward,
Going forward, we will be. And some of the money that we're not spending on transportation this year will be part of that breakage that we haven't presented in this budget because we're trying to be as conservative as we can.
We still have the same number of buses going out every day. They just don't have right now, because of COVID protocols. They're not as many students on there.
Yeah,
We
okay,
still are
gotcha.
putting those miles on those buses.
gotcha.
I mean, last spring was a little less, but.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but, yeah.
Yeah.
So our next budget workshop, March 8th, 6 p.m., be there or be square. And we'll, like I said, we'll probably be able to snap this budget right in for you in March, hopefully, because we'll know what the feds are gonna do is the big thing. And once we know that, then we can put the rest of the pieces in place, okay? Any questions from anybody?
What do you say?
The number of years is, well, it depends. It could be 7 or 8. Yeah, it's 7 or 8 minimum.
Yeah, minimum, yeah, there was 6, 7 years. Some of these buses are going 6, 7 years with having to replace.
Any other questions? You might not have a question now, so if you have one, you know how to get a hold of me. If you have one later, you just reach out and I'll help you. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoe.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Yep.
I want to take note that you said we have no idea about how much money we're getting from the federal government, and Luna barked. So I don't know if that's an omen
That's right.
or I just don't know. That's the only time she barked, so.
If you want to get a good education on the tax cap, some of you really might want to. The tax cap is a pretty cool formula when I look at it from a math perspective. The governor in 2012, he did not want school taxes to go above 2%. And if you look at it statewide, his average right now is like 2.23%. So he's kind of got, it's a pretty intricate math formula, and Zoe did a really nice job. She put it on a separate piece of paper for you, so you can really see how the tax cap formula gets broken down by each figure, so you can see where it goes. So it's, I don't know, to me, it's pretty interesting because you've got some schools that have tax caps of 10%, some that have -2, but over since 2008, 9 years, it's snapped into almost 2%. So that formula is working the way he wants it to, I would say.
It does. And I think just to reference, if you look at the tax levy limit, not the bottom line of that, I call it in the middle, that tax levy, we were negative. With the calculation, we were a negative tax cap until we put those capital exclusions in there.
Yep.
So we were one of those districts. If we didn't have a project on the books, we would be looking at a flat tax rate,
Yep.
tax levy increase.
Cool. So thank you.
You guys have a current fund balance from that?
I just got it today. I haven't opened up the email, Chad. Just so everybody knows, Chad probably understands this, the central business office, the treasurer sends a monthly calculation of estimated fund balance. It right now, it usually gets closer and closer. Every month it gets more and more of a true number, but I know last time it was close to 900,000, but that's him estimating things and things he doesn't even know we're gonna make purchase, but
Sure.
I can share that with you, Chad, if you'd like.
Little light
I'm
reading.
interested in this.
Yes.
All right, are there any other questions regarding that?
Nice job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So you get to present your first budget this year?
I don't know if I've been given that. Anyway, yeah. I get a little every board.
All right. All right. I'm watching.
That's not good.
No.
All right, I will call the regular meeting to order, and if you'd please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. We are at the public access to the board. Given our one person in, no, for those watching from our YouTube channel, if you have comments, please use, if you're watching, please use the YouTube chat feature and the moderator will let us know when a comment is made. I'm going to wait a minute and maybe 30 seconds. No, are we good? No comments? All right. All right. That brings us to the approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Jeff and Carrie. Are there any questions on that? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. That brings us to the acceptance of the January 11th minutes. Are there any questions on those? If not, those will stand as submitted. And that brings us to the acceptance of the treasurer's report. Are there any questions on that? If not, you're checking for Corey as well, right? Sorry, thank you, Corey. If not, all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. And that brings us to the administrator's report. And I think Chris is gonna talk to us again.
Yeah, I'll be as brief as possible. I apologize for how long the budget presentation was.
It's all okay.
So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit, just to put it on public record, is the veterans exception. And there's not a board member around the table that doesn't care, or that don't, or Luna, that doesn't care about our veterans. The thing is, the veterans exemption is something that was offered in 2013-14. And essentially what it means is this, each school district by vote has the option of taking a certain amount of property off the rolls for taxes, and not have certain pockets of veterans pay tax. But what happens is, instead of that number being taken off the rolls, that number comes away from those veterans and gets put back on the remaining taxpayers. So what that does is it has an impact. It has an impact on anybody who's paying taxes in that area. So in 2013, 13-14, there was a pretty large push to adopt the veterans exemption. Some schools, not many, some schools around the state in 2014-15 decided to adopt. The previous district that I was in decided to adopt the least exemption that was possible, which in the county that I was in was level C. But you also have to remember that I had over $1 billion of assessed property. So the impact on the local taxpayer was next to nothing. When you take a look at a community like Marcus Whitman, or anybody around us for that matter, that number becomes significant when you put what would come off of a veteran's tax bill and get put on someone else's. So in 2013, 14, 15, the county did an estimate, just Ontario County. Yates County works a little bit different. They're great people, but the way that their office works, they don't have all the same people doing all the same jobs. So it's much more difficult for them to generate information that they don't already have. So one of the things that they don't already have is they don't already have how many veterans live in Marcus Whitman and would qualify for the veterans exemption. They might know how many veterans there are total in Yates County, but they don't know how many are just ours, let's say, or in how much they're entitled to based on their values of their homes. But in Ontario, they knew that. And so the number would be somewhere probably around $7 million just for our Ontario veterans, where they would not pay $7 million worth of their taxes. That would go on the other people in our school district that live in Ontario County, and in Yates County for that matter. And then if you were to add to that, whatever Yates County would come up with, if you really push them, it's going to be a pretty large number. So what I've said to the veterans who have come, we've had them since I've been here in almost 2 years now. We've had probably a half a dozen veterans. I would say that one came pretty seriously about it. That was Trooper Braun, who's a veteran from the Marine Corps before he became a state trooper, also a Whitman graduate. And he's one of the ones that came and really voiced his opinion, I would say, about wanting the veterans exemption. I'm a person of my word. So when I spoke, I promised I would look into it, and I promised that I would make a presentation to the board just to put it on record. Explain to him the intricacies of it, explain to him that it's a 2-year process. So even if you said to me, we want it, you wouldn't have it until the 2022-23 budget year, because you have to have a certain number of hearings and have to be held within a certain number of dates and all of that. It's my recommendation at this point in time for a couple of reasons. One, the global pandemic continues to put us into a state of unknown. And until we know more about how much money we're going to get, I wouldn't give up more money to all of our taxpayers. I think we're all in this together right now, and until we get to a spot where you could say, okay, moving forward, we know what the impact's going to be, then maybe you have a conversation about it again. And then the second thing is, and what I learned in my previous community, while most people very much enjoy our veterans and thank them for their service, what I found as a backfire in my face into our Board of Education were people who were very, very bitter that maybe somebody maybe wasn't deployed, but they got the exemption, maybe all of that. And honestly, back then I didn't think about that. I didn't think of somebody who served in the Cold War and sat at a desk in New Jersey and never went, but now gets a tax exemption and all of that. And so I learned that the hard way. So I would tell you that no good deed goes unpunished. And if you were to get interested in giving a veterans exemption, we'd have to be really ready to tell people about what their tax impact is going to be from that, number one. And then number two, be ready for some of the fallout that maybe we wouldn't have expected. So I think respectfully, with all pride to our veterans, I would just say that now is not the time that I would entertain it. That's just my thought. Again, it's your decision, but that's my thought.
Chris, how many
Yes.
households, how many veteran households?
Well, so we would know Ontario almost, right? From that
And I think, just to clarify, what Chris said, the 7 million, that's assessed value.
Assessed value, yeah.
So the value, so I can tell you, I want to say, I don't know why 50 runs in my head between that 50, 60, but we can follow up with you on that.
Yep. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna know Yates though, because they can't tell
I
us
think so.
how many are, I can only tell you Ontario, like, wouldn't be able to tell you this.
We had this conversation.
We
did.
did.
We did.
And I had, and so I sent you that attachment from a few years ago that you had, yeah, that's what you got. So we can find for Ontario, I can't find, we'll be able to find for Yates easily. Unless you really tasked them with it, and it might take them a few months to get it to us.
Who does the final vote on that? I say we did.
Yeah, so the Board of
Board.
Education does, the full board does, it is not, it's you. No. It does the final vote on that, so. Yep, and if you want any other questions answered, I'd be more than happy to. I'm sorry, I couldn't, we did try as hard as we could to get Yates. Yates is just, they're just bogged down with everything else that's going on. Ontario, we could probably get you a little bit more information, but they're using all their resources to concentrate on vaccine clinics in their own budget, and so it's just.
And the girl at Yates said by the end of this week, she thought we'd have something.
Yeah,
So
so-
I might have something coming.
We'll get you what we have.
You also shared that none of the other school districts around.
They don't, and they're not going to. I actually did a little poll around, they're not going to, for the reasons that I mentioned. So, next thing is, athletics. It's unfortunate that athletics sometimes, carries the conversation in school districts. It's been disappointing for me since I started in education. And that feeling continues, even though I have kids who played sports and all of that. We're trying our absolute best, and by we, I mean Dan and his crew, our district office, our employees, Mr. Pauly, who we're trying our best to get athletics off the ground. And we had a scrimmage yesterday, went very, very well, figured out some protocol stuff that's going to work for us. It appears that we'll be able to get some fans in the stands, maybe as early as the first varsity game that we have on Thursday. So now, no good deed goes unpunished. The next group that's going to be to us is going to be upset if we can't make it happen. Are going to be our modified parents, of course. And so I took a walk down to the middle school gym today to take a look at that. That gym is much smaller. We're not going to be able to get every kid's parent in there for every game. We may have to rotate them through games and then be able to get them one or two games in the high school gym where they can all go. This is we're trying. And I know some parents are upset that we can't make it happen like that. With everything else we have going on, we're trying and we will make it happen. It's just, parents may have to take an active role in helping us get gyms cleaned up after games and stuff like that. We're going to work on that tomorrow during the day. Is what we're going to do there. So, and then, I guess if you see anybody and they're upset with me about athletics, please send them my way. I don't know what else I can do to try to get. We only have so many people. They're working 1 million hours, and it's just difficult. And we don't, like the gym space, for example, at the high school, it's a big gym, but we have to socially distance the players, we have to socially distance the coaches, the officials, the people at the scorers table, we have to socially distance. You can't have subs right next to the table. We have to have a space for them, which pushes everybody out and back, similar to what you might see in an NCAA or NBA basketball game. And then when you do that, that eliminates like one side of the gym. So you only have the other side left. And then where are you going to stage people? Can't stage them in the auditorium because you are holding drama with the kids and everything else. So you try to hold them in the hallway in between the gym and the auditorium and hope people keep their distance, and you have to staff that. And you have to check people in and et cetera, et cetera. So we're not upset about it and we're not frustrated. We are not frustrated at all because I understand as a parent who would want to see my child play, I would want my school district doing everything in their power to make it happen. We are doing everything in our power to make it happen. And we will as soon as we can. We talked about the budget, the capital project, again, couldn't be more pleased with how things are going right now. You'll have a chance in this time next week. I should be able to call all of you and invite you in to take a walking tour of the second floor using a stairway. They're gonna finish that this week, hopefully, and I talked to Mr. Herendeen, who's a parent in the district, had 2 kids graduate. He's the lead for the contractors working on it right now. Talked to him today. He said that they hope to have the stairs in to get us up and down safely by this time next week. So as soon as we can, you'll get first dibs. I'm gonna call you up and see if you want to come in and take a walk through the second story. They've already framed the walls and everything else. It's cranking right now. And it's going very, very well for us. And just wanted to say that. So that's all I have. Food Link coming up on Thursday. Thank you for all who have volunteered. And again, you don't have to be at Food Link to be a volunteer. Everybody here is doing something. And the community, what I want you to know is that the community knows that. So when I'm talking to people in the community, they know that they know they need us, and they know that we know that, and they know that we're doing everything we can to make it all right. And then probably lastly, if you're a fine arts person, significant movement in fine arts world. I know all of us have tried to write letters and lobby and all that to get more fine arts available, to get the restrictions lifted. That's coming probably in the next week, I would say. We'll have some restrictions lifted for that. We'll go from there. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Does anybody have any further questions for Chris?
Yeah.
Who we got?
Everybody here knows, yeah, I'm big into sports. I love sports. I know we're gonna be pushing for fine arts next.
Yep.
I'm curious when the push comes to get kids to school 5 days a week. To me, this was done very backwards. This isn't a Marcus Whitman thing. I'm just, as a parent, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this.
Yep.
My wife is now on unpaid time because we've gone through all of our time because we're remote Tuesday, Thursday. There's quarantine this day, half day Friday. I'm like, what are we doing to get kids back in school?
Yeah, so it's a backwards lobby, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're involved in that.
Oh, yeah.
It's.
And I get it. I know it's a process. And
Yeah.
I want to preface, thank you for all you're doing, and everybody, I don't mean it that way.
Yeah, no.
Just, I know a lot of families are in our boat.
Yep.
They don't know what to do anymore.
When we look at the largest lobbies, when it comes to anything, the largest lobby, well, there's the teacher lobby is number 1, and the athletics lobby is number 2. And unfortunately, when you look at urban center education, which is where the majority of our educators come from, New York City and out, that lobby was to keep kids home. And that's what they got. So like, it's really interesting, I think, to read national news and all that and see how some places are just thinking about getting any kids back to school, right? But in New York State, that was the largest lobby, and so that's there. And then you add to that, athletics is the second largest lobby, so they wanted to get kids back to play and everything else, and they, quote, won, right? And so that made it look really weird when athletics can do stuff, but then you have to still be 12 feet apart to sing, which is ridiculous, right? So what has to happen now is, and we talked about this around the table, there has to be a huge either letter writing campaign or something, a backflow to the governor and the state health department to say, okay, we're going to use your own logic against you to get kids back in school, if that makes sense. And that's the next stage that's coming once they release the fine arts regulations. Yeah, so it's, to me, I'm pushing for 4 feet. If they give us 4 feet in masks, we can get every kid back to school. I think if you talk, the difference between 3 feet and 4 feet, besides being 12 inches, as Ken Sealing would say, is there's a difference, because when you talk about the width of the desk is almost 3 feet. When you really think about it, that 4 feet gives you a little bit of the extra distance. We wear masks and all of that, and then we go from there. And that's why that'll probably be the next lobby. And most schools I've talked to, 4 feet works. And so I think what we're going to do is kind of We may bargain for 3, expecting 4, and that kind of thing, but that's, when I say the next thing, that'll probably be before March, you'll be hearing that. Yeah, it's a great point.
No, it's just, you know, kids can wrestle.
Yeah, kids
But
can wrestle, right?
We can only put one kid
Does
in a
that
bus,
make sense?
Yeah.
or even
Yeah.
if he's 6 feet apart. And you sit here and you think, you know, our community is at their end, our teachers are
Yeah.
beyond at their end. And this is something that we could get our kids, look at the stress it relieves on everybody.
Yeah, totally
You
agree.
know, and it's just,
Yeah.
again, I love sports, and I love
Yeah.
fun, and I want
course.
kids to be able to do everything that they want to do.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's just like, well, gotta be a way.
Yeah.
It has to.
There's definitely a way.
I think, I don't know, I don't know if you've been in touch, anybody's been in touch with Pam Helming's office. She really seems to be vocal. So I would highly, I'm not that person, but I spoke to her office for the first time. I had nothing to do with the board. But I would highly recommend, they got right back to me and, but if you can get 10 people to call regarding that specific thing, they're gonna hear you.
Here is 11, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if everybody can eat, I mean, sometimes I had actually written a letter and I was like, no, forget it, I'm not mailing that. That's gonna take a week and whatever. And I'm not that person, but I picked up the phone and I think she's hearing that topic. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope she is, but
And to your point, I know Chicago is not, you know, it's not that, you know, we're not trying.
Oh, yeah. and-
no, but I think you make a good point.
It's worth the effort, and I'm waiting for that, because I think what they're gonna say about the singing is they're gonna relax that social distance, just like they do for
Right.
sports, and then it's like, bam, okay, now if we can do that, then we're doing it for classes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Are there
Yeah.
states that have already gone to 3 feet? Did I hear
Not
that?
in New York State, because. you
No, not
can't-
in New York, but other states.
Oh, yeah, because
That's
the
what I
reason why you're
thought.
not doing it in New York State is because the fire code won't allow the polycarbonate barriers because they're flammable. That's why. So that's why the New York State rule
So
says
that's why.
it's 6, that's why the New York State rule says it's 6 feet.
But they
And the
got
mask.
it.
Right, I know, but that's just, it's, well, that's why you still do a billion fire
I-
drills.
I've
when it's the
never
last
heard
school fire. You know, you do a billion fire drills, we do fewer lockdowns.
1954.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's,
But
I think it was
there's,
1954.
but there's like the city of Rochester hasn't been to school.
Right.
No, right.
And the only
Well, that's where I
kids
think he's saying, that's their choice, and their teachers are fighting it.
are- At least our
That's
kids are
right.
coming somewhere.
I just know like our teachers here would rather their kids be sitting in front.
Oh, I'm
You
sure.
know, and what I said, there's no knock at our teachers.
no,
It
no,
doesn't
no,
work.
no,
You know,
no.
it just doesn't work. It's
It
not
makes
their
total
fault. They're
sense.
doing the best they
They're doing the best they can.
Yeah, but you're obviously not alone either, Chad. I mean, you're speaking for a lot of
Oh,
parents in
right,
the
you
same
know,
boat,
it's-
so,
A lot of them have no control.
yeah.
Right.
Oh, correct.
But it makes total sense.
I certainly want to be up there.
No.
Has that been a discussion at the legislative thing at all? I mean, that particular, I mean, obviously, we're trying to get kids, no, I'm surprised. But. All right, are there any other questions for Chris?
Thank you.
All righty, thank you. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. I believe it is G1A to G7. I got Jeff and Phyllis there. All right, are there any questions on that? What's that? Corey, thank you. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is carried. That brings us to our second access to the board. Again, if anybody online, please use the chat box. Anybody? No? All right, seeing no, I'll move on. Board member items. We wanted to go back to writing all the committees on there, if anybody wanted to report from the committees. I know the audit committee, we had a meeting, I can't tell you the date, January 22nd, yeah, something.
I think we should just update the board that we've gone out to do an RFP for audit services, auditors. Every 5 years, you have to go through the process. So the audit committee will be meeting the end of this month to rate them and then bring a recommendation to you in March.
All right, I don't think there's anything else from the audit committee, huh? All And buildings and grounds, I know there was a meeting, I don't know if you've had it or you're having it.
So-
You had
so
it.
We had it. And,
Okay.
And so the pictures that we sent via email.
Yeah.
that-
Oh.
we got those pictures out of that, and, just also discussed that we're on time and on schedule.
Lose track of what's there. And the safety committee, I think did they meet via Zoom or?
They met via Zoom, and the reason, focus point was we have to do an addendum to our plan for the pandemic. We have to have a plan if we have a pandemic and where we're gonna go, how we're gonna move forward. So Erica and Dan have done a great job of putting all the pieces together. It has to go out to each union association for their review, and then we have to submit it. So that's where we are with the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. The 4 county meetings, figure since I sat through the Zoom, I'm gonna report for 2 seconds. The January 28th meeting was on dismantling systemic racism. I didn't know what to expect when I got on it, and I was saying to a couple people, are you on that one or the other? Yeah, I gotta tell you, I was like, okay, how is this gonna go? It was by a Karen Hughes and a Dr. Alexandria Connolly from the Nyack Public Schools. There was lots of technical difficulties getting on the meeting, so I think they lost, I think they lost the way I could figure it out, because you couldn't see yourself on that Zoom meeting. I think there was still about 20 people on it. I'm not positive on that, but how they brought humor to that topic is beyond me, but it was probably one of the top 5 sessions that I've ever listened to from 4 counties. It was, and forgive me if I say the wrong terminology, I'm not as skilled in it as they are or schooled in it as they are, but I mean, it was not about black and white. It was about prejudice, discrimination, stereotypes. And in their presentation, they used some videos, just little video clips. And I mean, one was from a 1960s classroom or whatever, and it was old, and you're thinking, what was it? It was so perfect and appropriate for what they were trying to do. I believe you can get the link from 4 County School Board. They sent out a link. I don't know if it was if you were signed up or whatever, but if you want it, I'm sure Shireen can help us get it from Sue Wyatt there. But I would listen to those 2 ladies any day. I mean, they were just very gifted at what they do, and that's what they do. That is their jobs. They I can't tell you their exact titles, but it's about, that's what they do all day long. Is try to have try to teach the students. They work for, I think, 3,000 students or more, but it was very, very good. So, and then we had a board of directors meeting on the 2nd. I think you were on that too, aren't you? I can't remember if anybody else was. I'm sorry. There was about 18 participants, and they had a big discussion on, do we want to have Zoom moving forward, or do we want to actually go? And if anybody's had to drive to Newark for those meetings, it's, I keep saying, wow, this is awesome that you can go to these, because like that first one, I don't know if I would have driven to Newark to go, but I was like, just click on my Zoom thing, and it was, easy. There was mixed emotions, because I think, some people are feeling a new board member made a comment of, I'm new and I don't get to meet people face to face. And so it's very true. But I think in the future, I'm guessing they're going to do some sort of a hybrid permanently, because I mean, there's people that drive from an hour away, and we are all volunteers. But
So we're trying to work on to get the school district into 4 counties who are not.
yes,
So they think this maybe help them to go.
yeah.
Also, they had a big discussion about the county.
Yeah, they had a big discussion.
Because
Yeah, that
they
was-
wanted-
And I would have been mad if I had driven a half an hour to have it. It was, do you want to have the meetings at 5:30 or 6 or 6:30? And I'm like, just tell me a month in advance and I'll make it work or whatever. But it was a long, 10-minute discussion. But it was good, because, maybe we might do 6:30 one time and 5 one other or whatever. So, but no, it was a good, I think they are concerned about some schools, not any school in particular, dropping out, because they're wondering about their funding and whatever. And personally, I think Fort Counties has come so far in the last 3 years, because when I first started going to those meetings, I was like,
It's funded.
yeah, it was, yeah, I would not have sat here and recommend spending our money on it. But the legislative branch does do a lot of lobbying or, yeah. Do you have anything to add for that?
They
Yeah,
probably need the most out of it.
yeah, you guys probably do meet the most.
Yeah, they talked about the capital conference, which is a virtual
Yeah.
conference this year, and said it was really well, it went really well, it was very well organized. Got lots of information out of it, and it was recorded, so if you want to see any of the presentations that they did, you can see those. I don't know if you had to be signed up
That's, yeah,
to see them
but we could call, I mean, we could, if anybody wants.
or not. but,
Yeah.
They also had lobby meetings last week. I did not attend any of them,
Yeah.
sorry. But they were all virtual. They went really well. They were very well organized and positive. So they're looking for legislation, if we have any legislation for them to support. They want us to submit an article on it, and she's, I'm picturing.
Not Heather?
Marla.
Oh, Mother, oh,
Marla, is gonna send out an article on how to draft legislation. So some of the, representatives that they met with said that we should come up with legislation for them to present on things that we want. So if there's anything in particular, that you're thinking about, let me know, I'll bring it to them. They are gonna talk to David Little about, he's, the head of the Rural Schools Association,
mhm.
and they're gonna use him as, for advice and assistance in drawing up some kind of legislation. So in our next meeting, I think, that we brainstorming ideas, what legislation we could bring to the state and narrow it down to like 1 or 2 pressing issues.
Okay,
They also want to invite David Little to do a Zoom with us. He's
Yeah.
speaker, very knowledgeable man, so that would be interesting to get to talk to him. So, and they also want to talk to Sean Van Scoy, who's the president of
The legislative rep for our group, yeah.
oh, okay.
To get superintendent's support as well. They're also talking about trying to bring back a legislative breakfast. They haven't done it in years. They haven't done it since before I got on this board. I know that.
Oh, yeah, that's a long time.
And Carolyn Neville said she's been on the board for 11 years.
I remember, I don't think I ever went to one.
But,
Is it, they have the legislators come and then any board members can
you
come?
know, any board and anybody in Fort County can go.
Okay,
And they invite legislators to come, but the legislators are invited to talk to us about their concerns more than us talking to them about ours. So they're trying to schedule one for Saturday, October 2nd, 2021. I don't know if it'll end up being virtual or not. It might be like a combination of both. I guess Monroe County and Genesee Valley still have been doing theirs, although we stopped doing it. So, but it's for them to talk to us, not necessarily vice versa. I mean, we can talk to them after they present, to us, but it's more them talking to us about issues and things they can do.
And some interesting ones over the years, I can tell you that. Sometimes it turn into arguments back and forth, sometimes
maybe that's why they were stopped, or I don't recall. Yeah, okay.
they stopped right after the recession. Actually. I think when they stopped, they started them. I can remember going to them in the early 2000s. I can remember doing those. Really,
She said Monroe County and Genesee Valley still have been doing theirs.
good for them.
But Fort County.
Yeah.
our group in this area has not done that in a long time. I guess the legislators stopped coming, but they used
Well,
to
that's,
come
I was
around
thinking it
at
was
the
attending.
same time as all the lobby meetings. So it was kind of like redundant. They couldn't get some of the legislators to come.
Right, right.
You've already been inundated with people coming into
Right.
your offices, which usually is what the lobby meetings are. Why would you
Yeah.
come to another? That's why they wanted to do it in the fall instead of in the spring like they used to do.
I would think the legislators would think that's a captive audience or,
A lot of them send aides, and that makes it difficult because there's nothing against the aide, but it's not the
yeah,
person, you know,
yeah.
and it makes it tenuous sometimes.
Yeah.
Or you can have some good conversation with them also. It's interesting to get their take on what they think they need from us, which is usually a list of the unfunded mandates that we think we have. But besides that, you know, they do okay, you know, depending upon how seasoned they are, you know.
right, right. Well, thank you for doing that, because I know that's a commitment. Yeah. I had in my notes that, and I can't remember from that meeting, it said survey coming out from NISBA. Does that remember? So just, if that's true, I just wrote survey coming out from, yeah, that they wanted everyone to participate. So I don't know. So be on the lookout. You might get a survey. So, are there any other, I don't even know if there's core county meetings coming up. I can't remember. Yeah, I don't. I like how she sent out the whole year, but I can't remember when her year. Oh, look at you. Yes, there are more meetings scheduled. Yeah. But not until March 16th is the next general membership. And again, it is via Zoom and, you know, attend if you can. If you can't, it's okay, but everyone's welcome.
I think it's good
Yeah.
for everybody to participate.
Marla is very collaborative, I think. I find her. It's not just a meeting where one person talks. She asks for collaboration, and I didn't feel that before.
She's very knowledgeable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So.
I think as far as legislature goes, I think she's done a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Yeah.
She worked harder than the last couple.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, stay tuned. Are there any other board member items or anything? Anybody? If not, I believe we are going to, I need a motion to move into executive session to discuss the employment history of a particular person. We're gonna take a break. We got Chad and, or can I do that and then we'll both take a break? Oh, we're gonna take a break first, so hold that.
Everybody off.
Yes, hold that thought. Corey, stay tuned.